Hey everyone, Christian here from Blue vs. Orange TCG, giving you another tournament report and deck profile, this time on Metroplex, which is what I piloted at the tournament over on Friday at another local game store that I actually have never gone to before, but was hosting their first Transformers TCG constructed tournament, and of course I had to go to it just to see what kind of decks are going to be played there, to share with you, and just to get more experience in the competitive scene as a whole as well. So first off, before we begin this video, I just want to give a shout out to TCG.com. Over there you can find cards for sale for Transformers TCG from waves 1, 2, and 3, character cards, battle cards, whatever you can find over there. I highly recommend checking out, and over in the description down below you're going to be able to find a promo code to get you 10% off on your purchase over at TCG.com. That promo code is BVO10, and again, please check it out. And if you're gonna purchase anything there, please use that promo code. We want you guys to save money on Transformers so we can see you with better decks over at the tournament. So please check it out. Anyway, onto the tournament report, just to give you a little bit brief synopsis of what decks that we saw play there. This is a smaller tournament than what we saw last Saturday. Which was a 13-person tournament, which held lots of Hot Wheels, a lot of Optimus Prime Battlefield Legend decks. You saw a lot of that over there, a lot of Autobots, and you saw a lot of similar stuff over at this one here. This one was about 7 players. A lot of players from the last tournament were here at this one as well. So just to give you a little bit of a synopsis of the decks that were played there, we had one Origin 3-wide Optimus Prime, one double Prime with General Optimus Prime and Optimus Prime Battlefield Legend, Dreadwing and Raider Aimless deck, which is a really interesting deck that's been getting a lot of buzz around our area, at least in the Twin Cities competitive scene, and we'll talk a little bit more about that hopefully in the future. Hot Wheels was there, Metroplex, of course being piloted by me, was there. A variation of Blue Bugs using Wave 3 Skrapnel, Chopshop, and Barrage, where you would use Chopshop's ability to discard or to scrap equipment off of him to draw and heal one of your bugs, and using Skrapnel's effect as well. Whenever a weapon is scrapped, or whenever equipment on your side of the field is scrapped, you also get to heal for each one of those. So he was able to heal Wave 3 Skrapnel constantly, which was a really cool deck, and something that I don't think a lot of people have seen or thought of using Skrapnel for. And the last deck that was played was a Lionizer deck with Wheeljack, Lionizer, and Razorclaw of all things, which I also thought was a really interesting deck, and kind of shows. And I was happy because I think Razorclaw is a really underrated character in the competitive scene. Being able to flip him and just send him into an untapped character, really good. But those are the decks that we saw there, and for tops, we went to top 3. Third place was taken by Double Prime, again, OBBL and General Optimus Prime. Second place was a 3-wide Optimus Prime deck from Origins. And then, surprisingly, I'm sure this is going to surprise everyone, first place, going 3-0, was Dreadwing and Aimless, Raider Aimless. The deck that a lot of people in my area have been talking about, and just kind of gaining a lot of talk over just how crazy and intense this deck is. I sadly did not get the chance to play against this deck. This is actually the first time I got a chance to see this deck in action, and I can tell you it was absolutely nuts being able to beat out the 3-wide Primes 0-2. And this is definitely not like an unexperienced 3-wide Prime player. He's been playing this deck for a very long time, so he knew what he was doing with this deck, but this matchup definitely took him by surprise, as it did a lot of us at the tournament. Just to kind of, I hopefully can give you a little bit of a better idea of what that deck is in the future, but for now, just to kind of give you a little brief overview of the deck. It's Dreadwing and Raider Aimless, mono blue, using every type of like tough card out there, with like reinforced plating and extra padding to try to get as much tough on Dreadwing as possible, and to set up with the Raider Aimless weapon, Manifold Ion Particle Blaster on Dreadwing, to constantly try to get them 3 damage off your opponent as quickly as possible. It was a mean deck to watch play, and it was really interesting. Anyway, that's the tournament report for the most part. At least the decks I was seeing there. For my matchup with Metroplex here, We can get into those right away. So first matchup, again, was Hot Wheels, kind of like the first tournament using my Shockwave deck. Not gonna lie, I was not excited for that. Hot Wheels is not a deck I'm really particularly excited to play. In most cases, it's a fantastic deck, but I don't know why, but Wheeljack just gives me major anxiety. Every time he goes in for a swing, it's always like, oh dear goodness, how much attack is this guy gonna swing in, right? I never feel super anxious with Grimlock for whatever reason, even though he might be slightly more dangerous than Wheeljack. But just the fact that Wheeljack is there and he's just like there to swing for like bold 400,000, it just makes me all nervous. And with that, sadly, I went 0-2 in that match and just got absolutely destroyed by Hot Wheels, which sadly was going to put me straight up into the loser brackets right away. But you know what? That's okay, because I came there to learn. I already knew the Hot Wheels matchup with Metroplex was going to be pretty poor, all things considering, with Hot Wheels being able to untap constantly. It was something that I definitely was not expecting. I shouldn't say that, not expecting, but not expecting to win is what I was going to say. It was definitely going to be an uphill battle for poor Metroplex over here. But, you know, it is what it is. Second round was against the Blue Bugs variant with Wave 3 Skrapnel, Chopshop, and Barrage. That deck was really, really interesting. Wave 3 Skrapnel was actually really difficult to get around just because he was constantly healing for 4, like every other turn. And just the fact that I had to attack into him, Barrage was just getting pot shots off of Metroplex the whole time. And it was pretty frustrating to play. Especially in game 1. But I was able to seal up game 1 after several turns of just continuously proccing with Metroplex and swinging in with all 3 of my guys at once. I was able to go in, I was able to take game 1. And then in game 2, it was a much quicker finish because I sided in all the Pierce Tyrannies that I could against Bugs, and that definitely just crumpled the deck, sadly. It was still a really, really cool deck to watch play, though. And then my last match was against the Razorclaw Lionizer Wheeljack deck. That deck, again, kind of like Hot Wheels, it was more Wheeljack action, which, you know, definitely revved up my anxiety when watching that match play out, but overall, I was still able just to constantly proc with Metroplex and just keep getting big pot shots after like Wheeljack and then Razorclaw to just kind of seal out and go 2-0 in that match as well. So I ended up getting 4th place technically, and you know, overall it was still a fantastic time, and I had a lot of great learning experiences because of that. So anyway, that is the tournament report in a nutshell. Now I just want to quickly go over the deck profile for Metroplex, this Metroplex deck that I ran. This list, so bear in mind, this is the first time building and playing with Metroplex since he was released back in Wave 1. I've always had the idea to build him, but I've never like just pulled the trigger, and I don't know what made me do it now finally with all the new stuff from Wave 3, especially with things like Dampening Field and W5 Gyro Blaster running about. I knew Metroplex was going to have a harder time, especially in sideboards because of this, but I still just wanted to try it out and see how well he did. And you know, he did run it to W5s, but it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be, because he tends to actually run decent answers to W5, and I can get into that a little bit more in the deck profile. So just to quickly go over the characters here, I'm sure a lot of people know what Metroplex does, but in case you don't, he is a 25-star character, 4 attack, 35 health, 2 defense in alt mode, and 6 attack, 1 defense in his bot mode. So Metroplex is kind of neat. You start off with these 3 little small guys right here, and you keep them underneath Metroplex, and every time you flip to his alt mode, you can deploy 1 from him, and you basically continue the game with an extra character that you deploy. So you're starting off with Metroplex as a solo character, but you can kind of somewhat slowly build out your field with bigger, or not bigger, but little smaller guys to kind of help support Metroplex and be able to get off his big ability, which is in his bot mode side here. When this attacks and you flip at least 2 whites, 2 oranges, 2 blues, tap each enemy and do 1 damage to each enemy. So Metroplex is a weird, like, I guess he's like a weird, like, aggressive control deck, you can almost say, because the whole goal of Metroplex is to constantly get this ability to proc off and force your opponents to basically make almost suboptimal plays on their turn, because so for example, if I attack into Metroplex, or if I attack with Metroplex and in like against a Bugs matchup, right? And I'm forcing him to tap his characters every single turn and take 1 damage. I'm forcing him to think not so much like a few turns ahead. He has to think 1 turn at a time, because Metroplex disrupts the idea of being able to attack, set up attacks with different characters, because they're just going to get tapped anyway. And so that makes Metroplex a really, really interesting and fun deck to play, in my opinion. I definitely don't think he's gonna be any like super competitive deck. He never really was. He tops every now and then. He is what I call the king of rogue decks, because he was probably one of the first rogue decks to really come out of Wave 1 that was really, really viable. You still see him floating around, and sometimes he can make a splash, you know. Other times he doesn't. There's a lot of like answers against Metroplex. He's got a lot of really weird matchups, and he's overall kind of difficult to play, but he's still a really fun character. Anyway, so that's Metroplex. Let's get on to like his smaller characters real quick. First off, we got Slammer, who is 3/3/3, all stats around, and no other character side, ironically. He just is the tank, but you know, that's okay. He's still probably one of the better ones, because as soon as he's deployed, you do 1 damage to each enemy. So that synergizes with Metroplex and having his proc do 1 damage to each enemy as well. So this makes him really, really nice. And he also gives Metroplex bold 1 while he is on the field, which is going to be useful to try to proc off his ability. Next character we run that's run with Metroplex is 6-Gun. So with 6-Gun, in his alt mode, the rest of them do have alt and bot modes, just Slammer doesn't. When Metroplex attacks and 6-Gun is in his alt mode, as soon as Metroplex declares the attack against the defender, do 1 damage to the defender. And then if you flip to this mode, to his bot mode, until the end of turn, Metroplex gets bold 2. So again, this is all about helping Metroplex slowly chip away at characters and give him bold to try to proc his ability. And the last character that deploys underneath Metroplex is Scamper. In this mode, he gives Metroplex bold 1, not bad. But if you flip to his bot mode, while Metroplex is on the field, you can scrap an enemy weapon or armor. This is actually a really, really useful ability that I use constantly throughout the game. Being able to like escape route Metroplex into alt mode, deploy Scamper, and then use him to basically scrap out a Lionizer in one of the last games in my at the tournament that I played was really, really sick, and it was something that I definitely foresee being played a lot more. Especially if you're going to play Metroplex with all the Battle Masters running around, this is going to be really, really useful. So that right there is the characters. They're pretty self-explanatory. They're all from the Metroplex structure deck. If you don't already know where he's from, obviously you're not going to be able to pull Metroplex from a pack. Unfortunately, we don't have packs that size yet, but you know, maybe one day. Anyway, onto the battle deck. Alright, moving on to the actions here, we are running 3 Height Advantage. So if you don't know what Height Advantage does, it is a special card from Metroplex as well that works pretty much only with him right now. It's basically a supercharge exclusively for Titan characters, which Metroplex is the only Titan character, and it gives that character bold 4. So this is a even better supercharge. It's also a blue, which is really nice for helping proc off Metroplex's ability. If you start the game off with this in your hand, it makes you feel good. You never feel bad about drawing a Height Advantage, no matter what. Unless Metroplex is dead. Then that's pretty unfortunate. Anyway, moving on with that, our other action, of course, is going to be Supercharge. Not as good as Height Advantage, but that's okay, because Bold 3 is still a whole lot more bold than Bold 0. So we're going to run this in conjunction with Height Advantage to try to proc off Metroplex as much as possible. And then to try to get to our height advantages and supercharges a little bit quicker, we do run the 3 Confidence. Metroplex tends to not have a lot of cards in hand. Confidence doesn't really help with that per se, but being able to quickly cycle through your deck to be able to find possibly like a height advantage or supercharge or even rollouts that I'll show you a little bit later in the deck profile, that much quicker is just going to be really, really useful for Metroplex. A lot of the really powerful cards in this battle deck is from the actions, not so much the weapons. So the 3 Confidence is really useful for that. Next up, just so we can consistently flip him to his alt mode and back to bot mode as fast as we can, we do play 3 rollout as well. Let me just grab him here. As well as 2 escape route. So rollout, if you don't, both of these cards, you flip one of your characters from bot mode to alt mode if it's escape route, and then for rollout, you flip all of your characters from bot mode to alt mode. The only difference is escape route is a white pip that's a white and green pip card that is searchable, and then rollout is a blue and an orange pip card. Excuse me. Which is useful for proccing Metroplex's ability. So because this one card counts as 2 of those pips for the proc. Super useful. And next up for actions, like I said earlier, Metroplex doesn't tend to have a lot of cards in hand when you play it. So we're going to play 3 work overtime, just so in case we top deck it or if it's in our hand, we can use that and replenish our hand so we can get more head advantages or power punches or anything to kind of help Metroplex out in the battlefield, because this deck is all about Metroplex. Nothing more, nothing less. It's all Metroplex. And of course, we want to proc off as best as we can, so we're going to play a lot of the double pip cards. The first one playing is Security Checkpoint. With those double blues, of course, it's really useful for defending and for as a proc. But more importantly, this card does see a lot of play, because my build tends to run quite a few actions, I believe 22, 23. And it's not often where I Security Checkpoint with this deck in the game. And it's really nice because a lot of times weapons can... Obviously weapons hurts a lot of characters, right? But if you happen to miss the proc, it tends to just be Metroplex on the field by himself, ready to stave off like up to 2, sometimes even up to 3 attacks at once, right? And being able to minimize how many weapons you can have your opponent put on their characters, excuse me, to wear down Metroplex even more is super useful. So if you're playing Metroplex and only are using these for the blue pips, please consider running this with in mind that this can really stunt your opponent as well. And it kind of helps view Metroplex as a little bit as a control deck, which he may or may not be designed for, but I kind of see him as a control deck in that way. Along with that, we do play 2 marksmanship. Metroplex and a lot of his little bots are ranged characters. So you can play the ranged cards like Armed Hovercraft or Marksmanship. I really like Marksmanship in this because sometimes Metroplex, being able to constantly deal 1 point of damage to a lot of characters at once. Sometimes you'll have a character that's only 2 health left away from being dead. And sometimes if you don't have like an action card in your hand to give you like Bold, this is a great alternative to just chip away at 2 damage from an enemy. I don't see a lot of people running this, but I think it's a really good card in Metroplex and something should be considered. And of course the last action is 1 Press the Advantage. Press the Advantage, what can I say more about it? It's we run all Autobots. This card is beautiful for Autobots. That's really for Decepticons. Orange Pip can grab it. And it's stupidly broken. I don't know what they were thinking when they made this card. I don't know why they felt the need to cripple Decepticons so much by making a card that's so one-sided in terms of benefits. But that's okay. We still run it. It's still a fantastic card, so we just kind of got to buckle down and just play because sadly it's there. Anyway, rant over. That's all of our actions. Like I said, I believe that's 22, 23 actions. On to our upgrades. Of course, we run those double blue pip cards, Handheld Blaster and Improvised Shield, both of them. They're mostly there just for the double pips. Although the tough one and bold one do sometimes help out if there's nothing else you can play and you have this in your hand. Maybe for Improvised Shield, if you're just trying to survive maybe just one more turn and you just need that one more tough, you can try to slap it on, see if you get lucky. Or the bold one with Handheld Blaster, that's a little bit more useful. Sometimes you'll see it, sometimes you won't. Hopefully you only see this cards being flipped and not in your hand, because you don't want to see that. But they do make good fodder for green pip cards. We are also running 3 Power Punch. This is a beautiful thing to draw. This is basically your 4th, 5th, and 6th supercharges when you don't have a supercharge in your hand. And you can even play this with supercharge to give Metroplex Bolt 6. Excuse me. Sadly, it goes away after being used like grenade launcher, but just that bolt 3 is just super, super useful for getting the almighty proc off with Metroplex. And along those same lines, we do run 2 backup beam to try to get a searchable bolt 2 that we can consistently find. And because you're going to be flipping so much with Metroplex, you're going to be seeing this very often. Then on to the last of the weapons and armors. We mostly play a lot of white utilities now in this. So for example, for 2 force field, we run at least 10 to 11 or 12 white pips in the deck so we can constantly flip for the proc. There's a lot of great white pip utilities and armors out there. Force field being one of them. It's been seeing a lot of less play with things like bashing shield and ramming speeds and vaporizers being on the run a whole lot more. Excuse me. But Metroplex sometimes being only the only character on your board for a very long time, it's very, very useful, especially in the aggro matchups, to have this on Metroplex, even if it gets blown off. Just the fact that it could help Metroplex survive an extra turn is super, super useful. And then one of the stars of the deck here, Debilitating Crystal. So this card, when the upgraded character attacks, return one of the defending character's upgrades to its owner's hand. So this card outright destroys things like Battle Masters. They can't be bounced to the hand, so they just go straight to the KO area. And this is the card that is typically main board in Metroplex that defeats W5 Gyro Blaster. I had people side in W5 Gyro Blasters against me, thinking that Metroplex was just done now. But sadly for them, I would slap on the Debilitating Crystal, bounce off the W5, and act like nothing has ever happened before that W5 was placed. I'm considering bumping this up to 3 or at least sideboarding the third one. But I have enough white pips. I'm still testing out the last battle card here in the deck. But Debilitating Crystal is a fantastic utility for Metroplex just to kind of get by all those anti-bold upgrades that are starting to slowly funnel into the game. The last cards, and this is, I believe, one of the few cards from Wave 3, Spinner Rims. So with Spinner Rims, it's another utility like Debilitating Crystal, except when the upgraded character battles, after you flip your first white, you get to flip an extra battle card. So when you flip a white, you typically flip 2 more battle cards. This card lets you flip 3. And it doesn't sound like much at first, but you'd be surprised what 1 more card can really do for Metroplex in a flip. This card I find is really, really good in this deck. This has made his proc so much more consistent in the long run of the game. In all the matches I tested with Metroplex before the tournament, I sadly didn't get to see this be played a lot on Metroplex. But this is definitely, I think, a really, really good card in Metroplex. Being able to just flip that 3 cards with a white instead of just 1 makes it so much easier to find maybe a stray white or an extra blue or an orange. Whatever you need to get that proc off, and I think it's a fantastic addition to the deck, and I'm really happy to see it. So that was the main deck. I'll quickly show you here the side deck that I ran. I didn't side in a whole lot of this here, but I don't want to say it was useless either. This was my first attempt at a sideboard for Metroplex, and to be fair, I didn't know at all what I was expecting at this tournament, or even how to sideboard for Metroplex, because obviously Metroplex is 25 characters, or 25 stars. You cannot side in a character when you're playing Metroplex, so you're stuck with what you got, and you can't side anything up. But you do have the battle cards here, so I had 3 Heat of Battle. So Heat of Battle is a Wave 3 card, white pip, that all characters, when you play this, including your and your opponent's characters, they get Bold 3 and Tough 3 until the end of turn. This is a side card, not against blue decks, but against orange aggro decks. So I sided this in against Hot Wheels, which was actually a pretty decent card to be played because I was able to see my whites a lot more consistently putting this in, and it was extra supercharged and extra height advantage that I could draw and search out on my deck just to help Metroplex kind of get in for attack. So it was really good against the aggro matchups when I sided it in. Sadly not good enough because I still lost that match, but anyway. Other cards, the other 2 press the advantage. I sided these in against the Blue Bugs match, which, you know, again, this card is super unfair because it's searchable, and putting all 3 in, the poor defensive Decepticon decks didn't stand much of a chance against it, sadly. Especially with Metroplex just swinging super, super hard. But enough about that. This card is still also really good for your little characters. if you're playing against a Decepticon deck, because Slammer, Scamper, 6-1, they don't do any damage. Honestly, they don't do anything. But with Press the Advantage, they can actually do some damage. Excuse me. And then because I was really afraid of W5 Driver Blaster before this, I did side in 1 Vaporize, 1 Smelt, and 1 Ramming Speed. Just to get as much upgrade hate as I possibly can into the deck. I chose one of each of these just so I could have a little bit more of that color diversification for his ability. Looking back, I don't think that was really necessary. I think the Smelt would have been a good option. I don't really think I needed these two in the sideboard as well, so these will probably be taken out for something else. Maybe the bigger they are for my little guys to give them Pierce, so they can actually do something during their swings, or maybe a Laser Cutlass or two. Not really sure. The sideboard's still a pretty big work in progress. But the last card we played was 1 Noble's Blaster. To be honest, I threw this in here because I didn't really know what else to play. But in theory, I like the idea of it, being able to put this either on Metroplex, just if you're just trying to snuff out last bit more damage to end the game, and you didn't want to trust the random Bold 2 from Backup Beam. Or you can put this on your little characters like Slammer to give them up the base 5 attack, which then it becomes like, okay, that can do a little bit more damage. Wasn't really too sure with the sideboard and Noble's Blaster and everything really in it. It did fare decently well for me though. I didn't side these in very much, sadly. I didn't play against enough things that warranted enough for me to play them. But these right here, these are fantastic. These are definitely staying in the sideboard. Excuse me. Definitely. So anyway, that is the side deck, and that finishes up the tournament report and deck profile here for Metroplex. So if you guys have any other questions about the tournament, what we saw, how Metroplex did, how to play Metroplex, or even better, if you guys have any tips for me regarding this deck, or how I played Metroplex and things I could have done better, please let me know. I'm still learning this game fairly well, I like to think, but I still have a whole lot to learn, especially with Metroplex. This is like the first time I played them in literal months, but that's okay. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, everyone. I hope you all have a fantastic day, and keep on playing. Adios.